Finance too.
Encana converted its drilling rigs in Sublette County, Wyoming, to natural gas and cut, as a result of that process, volatile emissions by 85% in the Sublette County area in Wyoming. Another small step, but it shows the potential. And we heard a little bit earlier about closed-loop systems that can reduce the need for those waste pits that I spoke about earlier. The closed-loop systems not only reduce the need for waste pits, but reduce the volume of drilling fluids, according to the Environmental Protection Agency, and the chemicals that come with them, by more than 90%. Because the waste is enclosed, the chemicals can't evaporate, the fluids are less likely to spill, and the permanent pits aren't needed. Each one of these things might sound like an expensive wish list, an environmental wish list that's completely anti-energy and anti-industry. But the fact is that most of them can actually save money. A Texas Railroad Commission report, a case study that they did, found that one company that used a closed-loop drilling system saved $10,000 for each well on which they installed the system. That company didn't have to construct a waste pit, didn't have to remediate the land when it finished the drilling, didn't have to haul its toxic materials to a disposal site or pay the slew of environmental fees levied by the state. These are just a few examples. There's progress in produced water recycling, as we heard. There's progress in wastewater treatment, in well pad consolidation, to use one well pad for multiple wells instead of spreading around 7-acre disruptions across the landscape. The technology for these best practices out there. The structure, the regulatory push to force their use, their adoption at a higher and faster rate isn't. Most states leave best practices as voluntary measures. The changes are happening, but they're not happening fast enough to make enough of a difference. History shows us that the industry is spurred by three things to make change, to change. Excessive costs, the fear of catastrophe, or the imposition of regulation. We heard two examples earlier today. The increased chemical disclosure that we've had over the last 2 years has been the result of the scrutiny that's come to this process and little else. The recycling of water that we're hearing about in Pennsylvania is the result of scrutiny of Pennsylvania's wastewater disposal challenges and scrutiny from the press as well. Interestingly, those companies that recycle their water in Pennsylvania don't recycle their water in other drilling areas across the country. There are spotty areas where there's experimental recycling happening, but not 100% and not anywhere to the degree that it's happening in Pennsylvania, where there's no other choice. On an individual level, there are a number of things you can do to inform yourselves about these processes and to engage in pushing the adoption of best practices and more regulatory focus on drilling in general. The first, I heard earlier, getting baseline water testing is an essential component to preparing for drilling in your area. Should the time come, hopefully it doesn't, when there are concerns about the water being contaminated, having some baseline data that shows exactly what the quality of your water was before the drilling happened is the only way to show that there's a difference. Water can be contaminated for a number of reasons, natural and non-natural, and not all of them are due to drilling, and the scrutiny the drilling is bringing is leading a lot of people to discover that their water isn't quite as good as they might have thought it was in the first place. Secondly, simply engaging in your public system and ensuring that the regulations that the regulations that do exist are followed, have the support of their local governments, and are actually enforced, especially when regulatory agencies are as understaffed as they are. Just having a neighborhood watch kind of function, just being serving as an observer in your communities can go a long way towards making best use of very good regulations that do exist in a lot of these places. And finally, the push for each of those best practices, which overlap with several of the recommendations that have been articulated in this paper as well. In closing, I just want to acknowledge that there are clearly great benefits to natural gas, both economically and as a domestic energy supply. Not addressing those today doesn't discount their importance. It's just, this is not, in my view, the place to debate them or to decide which should outweigh the other. Rather, my hope is to inform the debate, to push governments and regulatory agencies to ask the right questions, to contribute to the discussion and empower people to make the smartest decision they can about these policies going forward. So, thank you very much, and with that, I'm happy to answer questions.
You speak about gas drillers forcing landowners whose wells have been contaminated to sign confidentiality agreements as a condition of receiving replacement water supplies.
Sure. This is, as best I can tell, standard practice across the energy industry. The standard practice across industry in general, I should say, but in my experience, used with a little bit more vigor in the oil and gas industries, both, not just natural gas, in exchange for any kind of economic settlement or other remedial recourse. Almost every single person that I meet with who has reached some legal resolution has had to sign away their rights to talk to the media or to speak publicly about their experience or what they found in exchange.
Can you talk about the repeal of the fairness doctrine in the United States and the ability of your organization and other media outlets to inform the public, for example, accountability?
I'm not sure I'm familiar with what they mean.
The fairness doctrine? Yeah, I didn't understand it myself. I thought maybe you would.